Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
I cannot believe this is actually happening.
Oh, believe it, Saxton. What a moment.
Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, what's happening, Rush Nation, and welcome to Draft Night. It feels like this off-season has culminated very slowly in tonight, and tonight is just going to go absolutely ballistic. If you don't recognize this voice, my name's Stocks. I am returning to 5 Yard Rush. If you don't remember me from before, hello again. It wouldn't be 5 Yard if I wasn't joined by my brother-in-arms, the hands to my Chewbacca in the 5 Yard Falcon. Big man, this is an absolute treat. How you doing, bro? And you're muted. This is terrific.
I'm not used to being on mute. I'm not used to handing over the reins. It's weird that you've called me Hans and you Chewbacca, because I clearly look more Chewbacca than you do.
Yeah, but I thought about this on how I was going to do the intro, and I thought, yeah, but of the two, Chewbacca's just like the guy who flies the ship, really. Hans does all the dirty work, all the fighting, all the monetary stuff. I can't really say I'm the Han Solo. That would just be unfair to you.
That's fair. Well, I appreciate it. It's first of all, there's so many things to unpack in the opening 30 seconds already, and I'm not going to take too long. That hype video, by the way, is incredible. I think we should just roll that for the next 3 months and just pretend it's your first show, so we can roll that out all the time.
Well, we can. I mean, it was Lee said when he heard I was coming back ages ago, he said, "I'm going to make you a hype video." So Lee being Lee, super busy. I didn't want to bother him. And a couple of days I said, "Oh, how's the video going, Lee?" He said, "I haven't done anything. How about a little bit of music?" And I thought, okay, that's fine. And then Simo, he said he could do a video. Simo made a video, and I said, put this music to a video. Simo did it. It was twice as long. I said, cut it in half. I don't need all that adulation. There we are, 17 seconds at the beginning of the show. Wallop, I'm back.
I love it. I love it. Great video. It's so good to have you back. It's a good day. It's a really good day to have you back, and also to have one of my favorite guests, and I guess technically one of my bosses as well on the pod to welcome you back as well. It's just awesome. I'm going to hand it over to you, Stocks.
So today's guest, I would like to say before I introduce him, as soon as we got onto the live stream, he asked me how the golf game was going, and I haven't spoke to this guest in a long time. So the memory recall there straight off the gate was fantastic. Of course, we're talking about the managing editor of Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros, Rankings King, host of the Fitz on Fantasy podcast, overall amazing guy whose memory is like an elephant. It's Pat Fitzmaurice, everybody. Pat, welcome back to 5 Yard, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Stocks. I'm honored to be the guest for your return appearance. That feels serendipitous. I feel very lucky about that. I have been sitting here trying to figure out if you two are Han and Chewbacca. Does that make me Princess Leia or one of the droids?
Let's go with Leia.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to do something with my hair, I guess. But yeah, it's great to be on with you guys. I mean, we're just hours away from the draft, so and it turns out. My wife normally works from home, but this is one of the rare days where she had to go into the office for meetings. My kids are at school, so I've got all this excitement going on, and I've had no one to talk to except for the dog, and he's not really interested in Zay Flowers' landing spot tonight. So just been pacing around like a caged animal all day, and feel very fortunate to be able to have this release to talk about this with you guys.
That's good. Before we get on to it, someone asked me this morning, are you excited for the draft? And and we'll get into it and we'll unpack it. I don't know what it is, and I don't know if it's this draft class or because last year's draft was so nuts. Like opening night of the draft was just blockbuster trades, a lot of things we've never seen. I just don't know. I'm just not as excited. And I think it's a combination of there's a lot of good players, but no exceptional players in this draft. And then you have, I think all the exciting trades are done. I just don't see there being that many. I mean, we'll unpack it. But I'm kind of just like, it's not going to live up to the last couple of years. And I'm a bit nervous that it's just going to go back to like a draft of 15, 20 years ago, where you've just got a lot of guys, a lot of contributors. There's going to be a lot of good play. I'm not saying this is a poor class. I just don't think it's a great class. And I think I'm a bit like, and normally when it's been like that, Tampa have been picking pretty high in the top 5 or 6. So then you're like, okay, well, we're at least going to get one of the good players. And now I'm thinking, like, I'm not really sure who we're going to get. And too many people are mocking Anthony Richardson to the Bucks. And if that happens, I might just quit. I might just NFL and like just put all my eggs into lacrosse or just some like up and coming sport that's going to overtake in the next 10 years. And I mentioned lacrosse because I know Pat's son plays. Because I don't think I can deal with Baker Mayfield and Anthony Richardson on the same roster, or Will Levis. If Will Levis happens, that might be worse, but we'll get into why we think that might not happen. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot of your takes are spot on, Murph. It is probably a slightly below average draft class, a little light on star power, a little light on depth at some positions. I mean, there's some positions that are pretty good. It's a good year if you need a cornerback, good year if you need an edge rusher. But yeah, there's some other places where the draft is lacking, not a great year for wide receivers. Quarterbacks, sort of a beauty is in the eye of the beholder type of thing, as we just heard from you, if you're not that high on a couple of these prospects. But I do think, as far as every draft is unpredictable, but I would say that on a scale of 1 to 10, with 5.5 or 5 being the typical draft, I would say that this is more like a 7 or an 8. I do think there is a lot of intrigue with this draft, and Daniel Jeremiah of the NFL Network was saying that when he does his mock, normally he can at least be assured that 27 or 28 of the players he has in the first round are going to go in the first round. And he thinks this year he'll be lucky if he gets to 20. Wow. Okay. So yeah, there could be a lot of unexpected names going in the back half of the draft tonight.
So just on that point, because I can completely understand that point, because I probably look at this draft class and think there is maybe 18 first round players by grade. About that number. I mean, I think depending on who you grade and how you grade, you might fluctuate to 22, you might fluctuate down to 16. But I think that's the sort of rate. I'm sort of at 18 is about where I'm at on players who I think would go first round in most drafts. And would have a traditional first round grade. So I can totally understand that point of we could see some random names, because traditionally you'd have quite a few DBs, especially safeties. This is an awful safety class. This is probably one of the worst safety classes I've ever seen. I can't, you've got one standout player at the top. You've got a couple that are day 2 guys. And then and the floor just goes. I don't think you'll see more than 5 or 6 starters out of this class, max. And I think that's really unusual. Same goes for interior offensive line. Poor center class, and I think that's what kind of makes this intriguing. I guess that's right. So I think once you get past the first half of this draft in the first round, I think it will be interesting, because I do think it could be random. I think you could see 2 receivers go in the first round. You could see 5. This really could go any which way, and I think that is the interesting part. But I guess I kind of feel like the first half of the first round could be quite chalky. Maybe you might see a little bit of surprise, but I don't think it's going to be that nuts.
I agree, and I concur with your estimate on the number of true first rounders. 18 sounds about right. I do think there's enough talent where the second round is going to look pretty good, and there's some interesting players. But you're right about the shortage at safety and in the interior of the offensive line. I mean, I know a lot of people have mocked Brian Branch, that one coveted safety, in the 20s, but I'm wondering if because of the scarcity, if maybe he doesn't go significantly early. And I know that, probably none of these centers and guards have first round grades, but there are some teams towards the latter part of the first round. The Giants come immediately to mind that have a major need at center. So it wouldn't surprise me. I think I have them mocked for a wide receiver, but it wouldn't surprise me if they just decided to take one of the centers seizing an opportunity since there are so few good ones and they probably aren't going to last very long.
Yeah, that's fair. See, I'm already getting trolled, Pat, by the way. Heard Tampa Bay are trading up for Will Levis. Thanks, Stacey. Let's go with no. Absolutely no. Dear God, no.
I was listening to a podcast today. I think the former Vikings general manager, Rick Spielman. He was saying they were talking about building their big boards and their brackets and stuff. He was saying that NFL teams only really tend to have a first round grade on 16 players, and then past that, it's a bit of a crapshoot. So yeah, I think you're both right with that, and it's going to be one of those classes where you said it, Murf, with the centre class being poor and the guard class not being poor. And there could be the team that goes after Skronsky as the tackle and says, well, we need a guard desperately. We think you can play there instead. We're going to take a punt. And because it's that class where risks might need to be done in order to fill positions.
Lost stocks.
Yeah, he's right, though. There might be some reason where teams are trying to fill needs, and so maybe some guys who would normally be projected in the second or third round could be pushed into the late first, early second.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that could happen, and I think you're going to see some that perhaps the day 3 picks maybe fall in the day 2. And then you'll have some, I think you're going to get some players really fall down boards. I think you're going to have players that were mocked at the high end of round 2, mid round 2, could slide deep into day 3 or even further because team needs will start to kick in then. And because there is so few guys, it is going to be fascinating. I agree on Stronsky, but I don't think he's going to be on the board that long because he is one of those players that he is that good. He is a first round talent. Like, I don't see him making it past 15. I think he's going to go before then. Brian Branch, I don't think makes the 20s because he's someone I think Tampa will snap up. They've moved Antoine Winfield Jr. They haven't signed Logan Ryan. There's a big position of need there. It would depend on tackles. I just don't think Tampa go quarterback. I think they're going to go tackle, or if Branch is there, I could totally see them going that way because it is a big position of need. They can't pay someone in free agency to come in and play that position, and it is quite an expensive position to fill. So I think it's going to be interesting. So I don't think he makes the 20s. I think unless the Bucs get a tackle they're desperate for, then he could, but I don't think so. So I think it's going to be fascinating. We should really break into this and look at this from actually before we do that. You're a Packers fan, Pat, and there's obviously big news this week before we unpack back to the draft about Aaron Rodgers. Now, I've spoken to a lot of Jets fans about this. I haven't spoken to a lot of Packers fans. What's the overall sentiment for you and for Packers Nation about this trade? It's been long in the making. It's been long expected, and now it's finally happened. What is the general feeling for of this trade, and how you think the compensations worked out for the Packers?
I think the general feeling, Murf, is that most Packers fans are sort of happy to turn the page and start with a new quarterback. And I think the sensible Packers fans realize that maybe our Super Bowl window has closed for the time being. And since the Jets appears to be opening, it makes sense for us to move on, see what we got in this quarterback who, oddly enough, we drafted just a month or so into COVID back in 2020. I mean, it seems like such a long time ago, and we still don't fully know what we have in Jordan Love yet. I guess I was pleased with the compensation. It was interesting. People were talking about which team had leverage in that negotiation. And I think both teams were woefully short on leverage. And it was sort of a game of chicken. I don't know if that phrase carries in England, but it did feel like two cars hurtling headlong toward each other. Who was going to turn first? I think maybe the Jets turned first. The Packers obviously didn't want to have Aaron Rodgers come back and have this problem with two quarterbacks and not be able to move on and at least see what they have in this first round pick from 2020. The Jets ready to win now with a Super Bowl caliber defense and just lacking the quarterback to maximize these attractive weapons they have with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. So I think it made sense for both sides, but I was pleased with the compensation. I heard it was sort of maybe one of the hangups had been some sort of protection for the Jets against a retirement for Aaron Rodgers after only one season. And the Packers didn't have to make any sort of guarantee like that. The only condition on them getting a 2024 first from the Jets is that Rodgers has to play at least 65% of the offensive snaps. So barring some catastrophic injury, the Packers are going to get a 2024 first. And that sort of puts them in a good position because either Jordan Love is everything they'd hoped he'd be, and they're ready to move in boldly into the future with him as their quarterback, or he's terrible, which could be the case. And if that's so, well, they're probably, going to have a top 10 pick for next year, and they're going to have this Jets first round pick. So they're going to have the ammunition in what is tentatively looking like a pretty good draft year for quarterbacks in 2024 to, get their guy if they're convinced it's not going to be Jordan Love. And as far as Jordan Love, I'm a little bit of a skeptic. I was not pleased with that draft pick, to say the least. In 2023, I had wished that they had gotten more help for Rodgers or, built the defense or something other than a quarterback who they actually traded up to get in that draft. And we've only seen Jordan Love make one start, and it was kind of a catastrophic start. Aaron Rodgers had COVID in 2021. So in early November, Love had to make a start against the Chiefs in Kansas City. And the Packers basically squandered one of the better defensive games they've had in the last 5 years, where they were actually shutting down Patrick Mahomes. And really all they needed was Jordan Love to string together a couple of completions in that game to get a big win in Kansas City, and he couldn't do it. His numbers from that game were pretty miserable. Now, he has had some decent relief appearances. He came into the game late in a blowout loss to the Eagles last year and looked good, but at the same time, the Eagles were up like almost 30 points and playing sort of a soft coverage, and kind of hard to judge him based on that. So I don't want to be too judgmental on Jordan Love. I admit to skepticism, but we got to give him a bit more of a chance to prove himself.
Well, 3 years is a long time. I'm still more shocked that you think that Aaron Rodgers walks into the Jets as the day one starter and he's not having a camp battle with Zach Wilson. How dare you? How dare you besmirch the great name of Zach Wilson?
Zach Wilson, he did vow that he was going to make things hell on whoever came in. So, I guess Aaron Rodgers will have to win that job in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I could see Zach Wilson doing that is either setting his mom loose on Aaron Rodgers or letting down Aaron Rodgers' tires. I can't really see how he's going to do that in a quarterback competition. Because an interesting stat is that since the 2019 season, no Jets quarterback has thrown more or 10 or more touchdown passes.
Wow.
Since 2015, there's no quarterback that has thrown 20 touchdown passes in a season. The last guy to do it for the Jets,
Vinny Testaverde?
Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Oh, that's right. Nice season with Eric Decker and Brandon Marshall, I believe, is his primary receivers.
2015. So, yeah, it was the last time a Jets QB threw for 20 touchdowns or more. So, yeah, they obviously know why they're getting in Aaron Rodgers, because we've seen enough Zach Wilson. It's probably not a bad thing. Speaking of draft picks, let's go on to quarterbacks in the draft. It seemed like forever we were going to look at the Stroud, Young, which way is it going to go? They're clearly going to be 1-2, and then now we've got all this noise with Will Levis to Houston. What are both of your thoughts? Where do you stack up on your evaluation of Levis and these other two quarterbacks, and what do you think is going to go down on draft night with these guys?
I'm skeptical of Levis, but it does appear that the NFL seems to be higher on him than the fantasy community is. I think he's got some mechanical issues, but he does sort of have the Josh Allen starter kit as far as the size, 6'4", 229 pounds, very strong arm, good straight line speed. I don't think he is as creative or as elusive a runner as Josh Allen is. As my Fantasy Pro colleague Thor Nystrom has said, he has seen Will Levis get crash test dummied quite a bit, where he just runs and kind of doesn't move and makes himself a sitting duck for on-rushing defenders. His pocket presence has been questioned, but it does appear at this point that there is a demand for him and that he is very likely going to be a top 5 pick. And strangely, at the expense of CJ Stroud, who was thought to be, along with Bryce Young, maybe one of the safest floor prospects. And granted, some people have been questioning how much of it was CJ Stroud and how much of it was, the fact that he has played with some phenomenal receivers. I mean, in 2021, his receivers were Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, who, two terrific first-round receivers who made splashes as rookies, and a guy who's going to be a first-round pick tonight. But I think one of the things that is rumored to be maybe sort of tanking CJ Stroud's draft stock is his poor performance in this S2 test, which is meant to sort of gauge quick processing. And apparently Stroud had a very poor score in that. And maybe the NFL teams are taking a hard look at that and wondering if they can trust their future to someone who basically tanked in this test. But we don't know. I mean, that could be smoke, and maybe CJ Stroud is a top 5 pick after all. So that is where these quarterbacks go. That is the primary source of intrigue tonight, because I think we could see Bryce Young is going to go number 1. That seems to be a near lock at this point. But as for Stroud, Levis, and Richardson, I think any of them could be top 5 picks, or any of them could fall. And some people think Richardson, Levis, Stroud could fall out of the top 10 or maybe even further than that.
It's bananas. We every year we do this. We look at the draft class coming in and say, this is a great draft class, or towards the start of the seasonal year, as it were. And we think, Bryce Young, Heisman winner, CJ Stroud, elite quarterback. And then it gets very close to draft day and we start to think, is Bryce Young, he's got this size issue that never proved the problem of Alabama. CJ Stroud, this new S2 test. I mean, is this the first year it's been done? It's replaced the Wonderlic. He came out and said, I don't test well. I'm a football player. I play football. My evidence is on the field and fair play. And it's just, I don't know whether it's a think tank thing or whatever. But I feel like as a community, we try and we get all excited. I think we get overexcited, and then we all come down a bit towards draft night. Draft night happens, and then we get excited again because as fantasy guys, we can then pick these guys on our rookie drafts and stuff like that. But I think it would be silly for CJ Stroud to fall past 2 when they need a quarterback. I just don't understand why you wouldn't take the surefire prospect of him and Levis. Of the 2, I don't want the guy who only throws a ball at one trajectory. I don't mind how fast it is. If he throws it at one level from start to finish, that's why you get picked off, because the corner knows where that ball's going. And I want the guy who is proven to stand in the pocket and slice you from 10 to 80 yards down the field all day.
And let's not forget Stroud's no slouch here with his arm.
No.
He's one of the more accurate quarterbacks when throwing outside the numbers in this class, especially downfield. CJ Stroud has thrown 85 touchdown passes in the last 2 years. Will Levis threw 19 last season. And we just sit in here thinking, I don't like, some points you just got to go with the talent. And this is where I don't get it. And I want to be really careful what I say here, because we had this issue a couple of years ago with Justin Fields. Justin Fields was a quarterback who, quote unquote, slid down boards because there were some issues with him and his ability. And I'm not a big Justin Fields truther, but you can argue that he was definitely pushed further down the board than he probably should have gone. And we have seen this, and it is with certain quarterback profiles, and especially when it comes to certain backgrounds that players come from, that these type of issues tend to permeate and come out of the rough out of the last minute. I remember there being huge outrage about Justin Fields and the way that he was being spoken about days before the draft. I kind of feel we're getting the similar with CJ Stroud, and it's a bit uncomfortable because we don't fully understand what this test is. It is new. The Wonderlic is the Wonderlic, and you can sit there and take as much stock in it or as little in it as you like, but you kind of knew what it was. This new S2 it's unknown. None of us have ever seen it. We don't know what it means. Those numbers to people outside of those giving the tests and the NFL organizations don't mean anything. Not really, until you understand it, until you've got years of data to analyze it. So people saying he's come out with a historically low score, against what? It would be the question I would have. What's the benchmark of a low score? And then, as you say, some people get nervous. They don't test well. You know, he's a football player. Like, I can think of a lot of players that people would have questioned their intelligence and how they are, and yet come out and absolutely ball out. So I'm a little bit worried at that. And we don't know what the results of this are, how far does Stroud fall. I think it would be mind blowing that he fell past 4. I think it'd be mind blowing that he fell.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make about the testing and us not knowing about it, when there was a test that was there for all of us to see, and it was CJ Stroud against the Georgia defense in the college football playoffs last year. A Georgia defense that is going to put multiple players into the first round tonight, and Stroud picked that defense apart for, I forget what the numbers were, 340 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, he looked terrific in that game, and didn't have overwhelming firepower at wide receiver. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think he should slide out of the top 5, but yeah, and maybe maybe he will go in the top 4 after all, and we'll look back at the S2 episode as being some pre-draft silliness. But yes, all of those questions to be answered soon, and I'm very eager to see how NFL teams regard CJ Stroud.
So I have a question for you both, and it's about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis together. If you were a GM and you've evaluated these players, forget need, do you believe these players in most years would be a first round draft pick on talent?
Stocks?
I think Will Levis. It was Levis and Richardson, right? You asked about. Yeah, I think Levis would be. I think he'd be a late first round quarterback in a team that didn't necessarily need a quarterback to start. I think he'd possibly be a late first round quarterback purely on. I think he has problems, but I think sitting behind the right coaching staff could see Will Levis be a starter in the NFL. I think Richardson. I think he's this draft class and this generation of fan experience and everything we're in now with the hype train of social media and everything. I think Richardson's combine performance, he could have never played football at Georgia, did what he did at the combine and still received the hype. Because let's be honest, the football he played at Florida, was it was not good, Murf, right? There isn't a Gators fan out there that thinks Richardson's a good quarterback. And he played in a good conference. So the conference of the NFL is better than college football. We all know that because the best players from college play in the NFL. And I think there's just been some sort of crazy explosion where Richardson's being talked about as a top 5 pick. I wouldn't even consider drafting him in the first 2 rounds unless I could see a path where I had the best coaching tree to get out of him. I just don't think he'd be better off declaring as a running back.
So I agree with your take that I think both of these guys, just because of the physical tools, would be first rounders, even in a better year for quarterbacks. I already kind of gave you my take on Levis, and I'm, not all that optimistic about his NFL future. I think I'm much more optimistic than the two of you are about Anthony Richardson. I think if you divide his final year at Florida into two halves, I think the first half was indeed pretty alarming. And then he made pretty significant strides in the second half of that season. I know people are going to look at the completion percentage, 53.8%. I mean, that's horrid. And he does have to learn touch because he has a bad habit of rocketing short throws that just require touch. And I don't think he's ready to play right away. I think he's going to have to sit for at least, 4 or 5, 2-3 years, but
10 years.
The starter kid is pretty impressive though, with his speed, size, arm strength. And, I have talked to Matt Waldman about this of Football Guys, and Matt Waldman puts out the exhaustive rookie scouting portfolio, which has, detailed in-depth scouting reports based on his extensive film study of these players. And he makes the case that while Richardson does lack playing experience with only one real season as a college starter, he doesn't think that Richardson is necessarily conceptually unskilled. He thinks that he does some things as far as pocket management and the way he looks off, not just safeties, but, linebackers too, and cornerbacks. Some of the things he does are actually pretty advanced. And he has talked to the quarterbacks coach of Anthony Richardson, who is also the quarterbacks coach of Brock Purdy. And he thinks Richardson has a lot of the sort of whiteboard expertise that Purdy has. And he thinks that, Richardson might be able to adapt to the NFL a lot more quickly than people believe. So I do think those are tools worth taking a chance on. Agree, though, that it could go any which way with Richardson. I mean, I think he could be a star, or I think he could be a colossal bust.
I'm so much lower than both of you on both of these players. For me, Will Levis is a third-round player. I don't understand. Yeah, we're looking at physical toolkits, right? How many times have we seen a player with a physical toolkit come into the NFL and not be good? It happens most years.
Quite a bit.
Most years it happens. We get a guy. Zach Wilson's a great example. Great physical toolkit. Horrific quarterback in the NFL. It's just these things that just, and I get that Will Levis is a bigger guy, and I get he's got that frame, and people sitting there comparing him to Josh Allen. It's insulting to Josh Allen. Josh Allen had a very decent college career. Will Levis, when he was playing teams that weren't in the Power 5, looked pretty good. He looked a pretty decent quarterback. When he's playing teams in the Power 5, all his numbers just completely fell through the roof, through the floor. You're talking about his touchdown rate halved, his completion percentage dropped 6-7 points. The guy was sacked on over 30% of his pressures. An NFL coach is not going to sit there and accept the fact that Will Levis takes sacks. It's just not going to happen. So he's either got to learn not to take sacks, or he's not going to play much, because they're not going to take that loss of yardage. You just can't overcome that against how good the defenses are in the NFL. Anthony Richardson was better off staying a year. Someone must have told him, hey, you're going to test so well at the combine, you're going to go in the top 10. And someone's told him that and thought, great, I'll go in the top 10. And financially, it's going to work out. And in the short term, it will. Financially, in the short term, Anthony Richardson is going to do all right. But in the long term, he's probably not, because unless he's probably the most landing dependent player in this draft. Because if he goes and lands somewhere where he's not going to coached or developed, he's done. He's not going to get any further down the road. And we're looking at Kyle Trask, was a very similar player who was a much better college quarterback. And he unfortunately landed in a landing spot that on paper went, oh, well, this looks good. He'll play under Tom Brady for 2 years. He'll learn from the GOAT, and then he'll take over. Well, clearly the fact that they've signed Baker Mayfield says that they're not happy with his development. So clearly he didn't get that coaching, and he went to a team that was all in, only focused on winning now, was not focused on winning for the future, and didn't think to really either develop this guy, or they did, and he's not taken it the way that he should have done. It's hard to know what goes on behind the scenes. Anthony Richardson could very easily fall the same way. And I think unless he imagine Anthony Richardson going to, I don't know, like for me, he needs to go somewhere like the Rams, where he's going to get, it's not going to happen because he's not going to fall that far down the board. But that would be the landing spot for me, where I think he's got half a chance to succeed. He's got a quarterback in Matt Stafford who would probably take him aside, who would probably coach him and develop him and would help him out as much as possible. But he's not going to fall that far. He's not going to fall. I mean, that's where I think his value is. I'm with you that his physical traits and moldability, there is something there. And I would put him at the top of the second from a sort of grading perspective, because I think there is that natural upside of, if you can unlock and coach and develop the player, there's something there. But I just think he's going to have to sit for 2 years before, and if he goes at 4, he's going to have to start. Like, you can't draw, like, he might not start week 1, but he's going to have to start by the bye week, because the pressure on the fan base will be on him to start, because he's going 4th overall. Like, you don't see many of these guys going in the top 4 sitting, that long. People use the Patrick Mahomes scenario, but he was picked outside the top 10, and he was playing behind a former number 1 overall quarterback. He's going to be playing behind Gardner Minshew, who I like Gardner Minshew. I think he's perfectly capable of starting in the NFL, and I think he could start the whole season for Indianapolis, but he's a 6th round player. And that's how people will view it. Whether rightly or wrongly, that's how people will view it.
It's a great point about landing spots. And unfortunately, some of the best places for him to go where he could work with a quarterback whisperer like Sean McVay, Doug Peterson, Frank Reich, he's not going to any of those places, unfortunately. And the places he could go where, somewhere like maybe the Raiders or something. I don't personally think the Raiders are going to take him, but like that would seemingly be a good spot, because he would be able to learn for a year behind Jimmy Garoppolo. But at the same time, I know that probably working with Josh McDaniels would not be like best for his development. And Matt Waldman told a story about that, where apparently, like, as soon as Josh McDaniels got to Denver, like after he had his first meeting with Jay Cutler like went to his agent and was like, get me out of here now. Like, he just didn't want to work with Josh McDaniels. So, like, hopefully he does land in a spot where he could, sit for a while, have a decent quarterback guru somewhere who could work with him. But that's the thing. I mean, we sometimes make the mistake of thinking that these players with raw but intriguing skill sets are going to get coached up in the NFL. And that's sort of not how it works. Because, I mean, the NFL coaches are busy going about the business of game planning and trying to win games. And like, it's not really, they're college professors. They're not grade school teachers. They want players who already have the skills in place. And now we're going to deploy you in this way, and working with them on that. They don't want to work with these guys on fundamentals.
No. They're fine from taking a solid foundation to acclimatizing in the NFL and developing that toolkit. And if that takes 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe a season, you go, fair enough. But yeah, you don't have these guys, because what's the life expectancy of a coach in the NFL? It's like 2 or 3 years. Right. They don't have that time. If they don't get, and especially when the pressure comes on a 1st round quarterback, you don't get that guy playing, he's done. Like, the coaches in most cases is done. There's a rare example where you've got Jordan Love, but it's understandable. He's sitting behind Aaron Rodgers. And I don't think that Matt LaFleur probably wanted Jordan Love. I don't think, if you'd said to him, you can have, who do you want in the 1st round of the 2020 draft? I don't think he's saying Jordan Love, because he knows he hasn't got the time. I mean, it's worked out fine because he won a lot of games early with Aaron Rodgers, 2 playoff runs, 2 championship runs. He's got credit in the bank, 3 13-win seasons. So he's got enough credit to have lasted to the Jordan Love experiment, we're going to call it now. But most of these coaches, if it doesn't work, I mean, we just look back to Matt Nagy and Justin Fields. Didn't work year 1, he's gone, and the GM's gone. Ryan Pace is gone. I mean, because they drafted Mitch Trubisky. That didn't work. The franchise gave them, right, you can have one more go, which is rare. They very rarely get to draft 2 first-round quarterbacks. So they get the chance with Justin Fields to move up to get him and use future capital to get him. And it hasn't worked. I mean, I'm not saying it won't long term, but ultimately it didn't work in that season and they're gone. And you don't have that luxury to train these players up. And so while people would be thinking Anthony Richardson, what a guy he could be, look at how he tested in his underwear at the combine. Ultimately, he's so far away from being an NFL player that coaches aren't going to love him as much as the general public and those that are fans of this process will, because it's a bit of a liability to a coach, especially if he gets drafted. Now, if he gets drafted in the second round, you've got that covered, like Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a great example of a player who wasn't quite ready to play in the NFL immediately, but it probably wasn't that far away. Got a bit of time, sat behind Carson Wentz, got coaching from Doug Peterson, as you say, learned the NFL, all of a sudden elevates up, goes to the Super Bowl. And that's where getting that second round pick, we saw it with Dak Prescott sitting behind Tony Romo. This is where you have these scenarios of players that don't go in the first round, that expectations taken away, that gives them that time to learn and to get better. And if it doesn't work, it's not on the hat of the coach. Like, no one's going to sit here and look at Kyle Trask and think, oh, well, they failed to develop him, therefore they should go. It's, well, he was the 64th pick. Bit of a luxury pick for a Super Bowl winning champion. Yeah, got it, didn't work, fine, move on, because they haven't blown the capital of a first round pick. And I think that's where it wouldn't shock me if Anthony Richardson slid or whatever we're saying, because I think whilst GMs might love him, coaches, I think, will see him as a liability. Yeah, but we'll see. That's what tonight is.
One of those players that you just talked about, Murf, where they don't necessarily go early, they go to a team, is Hendon Hooker. Obviously, there's been first round hype for him. With his injury and his age, Murf, we all know how you feel about Hendo. Pat,
I don't know if that's fair, but yeah, okay.
No, well, I mean, feel free to voice your concerns on Hendon Hooker now before Pat tells us what he thinks could happen. But Hendon Hooker is that sort of vein, Murf, where somebody could take him late round 1, early round 2, and he could sit behind someone like Geno Smith at Seattle, for instance. That would be a good landing spot for him because Geno's been signed for 3 years now. It gives Hendon time to rehab and then potentially maybe take over.
Well, Geno has been signed for 3 years, but effectively there's a get out in 1 year that is not horrific for Seattle. Like, on paper, it looks great. Actually, in reality, Geno is in a prove it year. He just got a very nice prove it deal with some more guaranteed money. But realistically, it's not a bad contract. For Geno Smith, who's been in the league for so long, like, fair play. He's done very well to get any sort of deal. So to get that, like, fair enough. My concern with Hendon Hooker is his age and the injury. And the two combined just don't work. I don't think you can take Hendon Hooker in the first round. And people talk about this 5th-year option and taking the 5th-year option on a quarterback. Again, the pressure of that of being a first-round pick is just too much. You required to have that work sooner rather than later. Hendon Hooker is not going to play this year because he's not going to be available. A report's come out to saying he'll be ready for week 1. Great. Let's say best case scenario, he's ready for week 1. So he's missed rookie camp, training camp. He's missed preseason. So all the time that he gets to learn the playbook and learn how to be a quarterback in the NFL and get some reps with the starters and the first team, he's not having. So he gets to the season. Let's say he's ready week 1. He's on the scout team. So he's not going to get any snaps with the starters or with the first team. He's not going to get any with the seconds because you need to have your backup quarterback ready to go. So effectively, he's on scout team and he's playing with practice squad players. That's not going to help him acclimatize to the NFL. So you can't take Hendon Hooker in year 1 and put him in a starting scenario. So you have to write off his first year completely because he's not going to have enough exposure to be ready. And you can't take a guy like that in the first round. I think the danger of that, I think we saw was it Jeffrey Simmons, I think, for the Titans, where they took him, but knowing he was going to miss most of his rookie season in year one, but he was an exceptional talent. I don't think you can say that about Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker's coming in the NFL 25. He's going to miss most of his year 25 season. He's going to be 26, almost 27, before his sophomore season. He's not going to have developed anything on the field to suggest he should start. So he's going to have to start his 26, 27 year as a backup and hope he gets an opportunity. That's just too old. We've seen these quarterbacks come in like Chris Winkie, who have come in much later in life, and they just, by the time you get up to speed in the NFL, he's going to be 30. And at that point, he's already at the tail end of his career. That's my only concern. I have to say, lovely guy, brilliant character, brilliant locker room guy, the kind of guy you would love. If he was 3 years younger, I would sit here and say he's got every potential to be successful in the NFL, but 3 years is a long time. I don't think you can, with that injury and missing all of year one, I just think you're asking for that pick to come and burn you. Again, take him in the second round and it develops and it works out, then great. And if it doesn't, it hasn't cost your franchise a notary pick. And I think you can get away with it. But I don't think the 5th year option gives you enough cover to take that pick and it not work.
To your point, he is older than Tua, who has been in the league for 3 years. And I think he's only 5 months younger than Kyler Murray, who's been in the league for 4 years already. And also, he does not have the exotic tools kit that Will Levis and Anthony Richardson bring to the table. He's got a good arm. He's, somewhat mobile, not as good an arm as Richardson or Levis. Not as mobile as Richardson, or definitely not as mobile as Richardson. And I think my concern, and I know this concerns Thor Nystrom, our Fantasy Pros college evaluator, is that he played in Josh Heupel's offense, and Josh Heupel bisects the field, literally bisects the field for his quarterback, so they only have to read half the field. And that's a major problem. And Josh Heupel was the play caller at the University of Missouri when Drew Lock was coming up. And, it was Heupel's system that helped trick NFL evaluators into thinking that Drew Lock was a valid NFL prospect. So, yes, I have those concerns. It's going to be interesting, though. I've seen him mocked as early as 12 to the Texans. I've seen him mocked to Seattle with their second pick at 20. I think he could fall out of the second round if no one's completely sold on him, but maybe someone trades into the back half to try to get the ability to maybe have him for 5 years and stretch out that window. But he is going to be one of the more interesting guys to follow in this draft, because I don't think he should be a first round pick, but maybe NFL teams feel differently.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I think, and again, I look at the 5 quarterbacks and I think outside of Bryce Young, probably the best character, the best spirit, determination, leadership, qualities from what I've seen on field and how they, and like all of those intangibles are great. And again, if he was 3 years younger, you could oversee some of the traits, knowing that you can give him time to develop into his reading, his processing, and all of those elements. But he doesn't have time. That's the biggest issue, is he doesn't have time, because this year's a write-off. And then you're looking at future years. He just doesn't have, he doesn't have that time that a 21-year-old prospect like Anthony Richardson is going to have. You could sit Richardson for 2 years or 3 years if you need to. You sat Jordan Love for that long because you could. He's old. He's young enough to where you can absorb that. But we'll have to see what happens. I'm curious to look at this running back class. Is there anyone? Obviously, Bijan's getting all the love in this class, and rightfully so. Every model he's breaking, he's generational talent is what we're hearing and seeing in everything that we read about him. We think he's going to go tonight. It wouldn't shock anyone if he did. Where do you see him going, guys? Like, do you see him going like early? Do you see him going late first? Like, do we think that he's a player that is going to be taken significantly earlier than in most other years because of the lack of first round graded talent, and Bijan Robinson is one of those players. I would say is definitely a first round talent.
I tend to think he's going to go top 10. I know that is no longer sort of the paradigm for drafting running backs, that there are a few who go that early. It's not like, when Leonard Fournette was drafted 4th or Saquon was drafted, second? That is no longer as commonplace. But I do think he's pretty special. I think you can make the case that it's worth passing up the opportunity cost to take someone at a higher leverage position. I guess on the flip side, you could look at it as, granted, running backs do have a short life expectancy in the NFL, and that is part of why they are sort of devalued. But if you want to build around a cheap running back who has a 4-year window, and assuming these guys do have shorter life cycles than most players at other positions, to get an extraordinary player who you have cost controlled for 4 or 5 years, I guess there's a case for it. And I do think Bijan is a pretty exceptional player and probably the best running back prospect we've seen since Barkley.
I think he's one of those players where it doesn't really matter where he lands. He's good enough to either push out who's there in a committee or just take over the job. So it's not as if, I don't know if he goes top 10. I completely understand what you're saying, Pat. And if a team is pretty close offensively, just needs a running back inside, the top 15 and punches Bijan's ticket, then I can see it, because like you say, it's controlled money for the next few years. But the way running backs are now valued in the NFL, I can see him sliding. He's going to go round 1 because, as you say, Murf, he's generational. I hate using that term, but he is as good as anyone has come out since Saquon, and I think he deserves to go early because he is one of, if not the best offensive weapon in this draft class. It's just how the NFL values running backs, and I could see Atlanta taking him. I could see
100%.
the Eagles taking him. And
I don't see that one on the Eagles. Atlanta, absolutely. Chicago, I think it'd be stupid given how many holes they have on their roster, but I absolutely could see that. I could see that as something that they would do. Atlanta, absolutely. Don't forget, this is a team that had many needs and took Kyle Pitts at 4. So with this GM and this head coach, so they're quite clearly knowing their talent poor on offense, they would roll the dice here. I would definitely think that both those teams are in play. I don't see the Eagles going there. I think they're quite happy with Rashard Penny and what they've got. And they're not a team that historically have had a running back that they've given all the workload to. They prefer to run through committees, and and that is how they're going to roll. And I think I could definitely see the Eagles taking a running back in this draft, but I can't see them using a pick in the first round to do that. The Texans, it wouldn't shock me. The Jets, it would. And then you're starting to get into territory in the mid first where he could go anywhere. There's a number of spots here.
He could go to Tennessee. Like, it wouldn't shock me if they drafted him.
Dallas,
that would depend
Cincinnati.
on what the quarterbacks have fallen. Yeah, Dallas, Cincinnati look. Even New Orleans, given the Kamara suspension come in, I think they're more likely to go wide receiver if one of the big 5 are on there. But again, if they're all taken off the board and get shuffled up early, and New Orleans are left without a dance partner, and somehow Bijan's still there at 29, that wouldn't shock me at the end of the day. I think there's a lot of teams that would take him, and I don't think they're worried about the cost, because I think we know what he is and we know what he can do. And ultimately, if you've got a run game in the NFL and you can pound the rock, you're going to win football games. And that ultimately, for the coaches, I guarantee you there's going to be 20 coaches tonight that are going to be pounding the table that their team drafts Bijan Robinson, because especially on the offensive side, because you're going to win football. He's going to win football games. Like, you're going to win football games with Bijan Robinson. The only reason why Barkley looks a bit of a riskier pick and why it hasn't translated into the success that you would have hoped is he's been injured a lot. That's the only risk I think you're seeing with Bijan. Is if he gets injured, that pick doesn't doesn't naturalize into the wins that you would hope. But yeah, I think I don't see him lasting past 15 in this draft. I think he goes early because you're going to win football games with him.
Is there a situation where past Bijan being drafted, Gibbs or Charbonnet goes to a situation that is so good for them, they tap on the 101 doors in rookie drafts for Bijan?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think there's a chance.
No.
And Charbonnet is, I think, I don't think there's any possibility he goes in round one.
Same.
Gibbs possibly could. I think he's being mocked in the first round in probably a majority of mock drafts. And I think it's minus money that he goes in the first round. I tend to be skeptical of that. He would be the first sub 200-pound running back to go in the first round since Javid Best in 2010.
Wow.
And he's also probably not a true 3-down back. I think he's, could excel in that Kamara role where he has under 200 carries, but is targeted frequently in the passing game. I think that's probably the optimal usage for him, but I'm a little skeptical that he goes in the first round. I like him though. I mean, I think he's going to be a talented player and I'd like to see him land in a good spot. I don't know if he gets drafted tonight.
If he does, it's 30 or 31.
Yes.
Because I actually weirdly think he's a better fit for the Eagles system. As you say, he's not a 3-down back. So I think for the Eagles, he's a better fit than Bijan would be, which is weird because you would normally say talent prevails. But actually, when you think about systems, and I think the same goes with the Chiefs. I think I look at the Chiefs and think, actually, they're so talent poor at wide receiver. If you see 5 receivers go in the first round, I can 100% see them taking Gibbs and thinking, well, we'll use him as a bit of a weapon to, with him and Kelsey, they'll work on that short to medium range target field. And then, they'll run with Sky Moore and MVS as the deep threats. And I think they could definitely do something like that. And Andy Reid is a coach that's good enough because you look at what they've got. CEH is down the pecking order, not great in the receiving game. And Pacheco, similar, more of a downhill runner, not the best receiver. He's not bad, but that's not his specialty. Whereas I think there's a role there for Gibbs to get out wide. You could run with 2 running back sets, which I know the Chiefs have run at times. We've seen them with 2 tight end sets. They might dip a little bit more and be a bit more fluctuating in how they structure their offense. So I could see Gibbs going there, but I agree with you. I don't think he's going higher than 29. And that's if Cincy want to take him. So if he does, I mean, I wouldn't shock me that if he went, but I'm with you. I'd say odds against he probably
I think
top around 2.
The earliest I think would be like Dallas, but I don't think Dallas takes him. I think he and Pollard are too overlapping with their skill sets. But I do agree with you that he and Pacheco I think would be complementary in the backfield together. You just wonder if the Chiefs feel burned by having taken CEH with the final pick of the first round a few years ago and having that turn out, colossally bad.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that's what we'll see. And then, Charbonnet, I think we'll see what happens. And then I think the rest of that running class is...
a lot of guys. I mean, that's the thing. I think there are about 20 possible guys who could pan out and turn out to be really good. I mean, I definitely have some of my favorites, like as day 3 or late day 2 possibilities, but you run out of sure things pretty quickly after Bijan and maybe Gibbs and Charbonnet.
Yeah, it definitely starts to tail off. There's not, as you say, there's a lot of dart throws. It would not shock me to see some of these guys and you think, oh, how did they fall that low? Well, it's what I'd say is a lot of dudes drafts. There's a lot of dudes. There's not a lot of studs. There's a lot of dudes.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of dudes here that can break out, and we won't break through all of them. But I think when you're thinking about rookie drafts, I think you're looking at those running backs. I don't think Charbonnet is Superflex, no chance in a 1 QB. Depends on his draft capital. If he goes high enough in the second, I think he could squeak into first round of rookie drafts. But it also wouldn't shock me to see him in second round of rookie drafts. But the other two, absolutely. I think in a one, I think Bijan's the 101 in all formats. I don't think
Agreed.
it matters whether it's super flex, whether it's tight end premium, whatever format it is. Bijan is the 101, and then I think Gibbs can go. He'll go high in a 1 QB. He'll go mid first, late first in a super flex.
Agreed.
Murf, you mentioned receivers. How many do you guys think are going to go in round 1? And if you think a lot are, who of those are potentially overvalued in your eyes?
I think the ones who could go in the first round, Jackson Smith and Jigba will. I mean, he's the one mortal lock. And then I think it's likely that Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison go, and pretty likely that Quentin Johnston goes. I mean, it's a class full of smaller slot receivers and flankers, and Quentin Johnston does have the body type to be an X receiver, and like his hands are a major issue. That could eventually tank his NFL career, but I mean, he does have traits. And I think those traits probably get him into the first round. And then there's some guys who are possibilities. I don't think Jalen Hyatt goes, but we know NFL teams are obsessed with speed. Hyatt's kind of a one-trick pony, but he does that trick very well. I might be forgetting about one of the other receivers. Who could I be forgetting about? I think it's those 4. Well, you
got Hyatt, so they're the 5 I would have is Addison, Johnston, Smith-Njigba, Zay Flowers, and they're the ones there.
Most likely 4, I would think.
Yeah, Hyatt is one I can see going to, say, New Orleans. So I think if the other 4 go early, and this could happen, right? It might happen. Then I could see Hyatt getting in to say, I just think that's a natural fit for what they're trying to do, and they're so talent poor on offense. I just think that works. But I think there's not many other situations where I look at Jalen Hyatt and think, I don't see him going to Kansas City. I don't see him going to Philadelphia. So I think, we're looking at, I don't see him going to Cincinnati. So he is one of these players. If he's going to go, he's going to need some things to go his way for him to go. I think there's some interesting thing about Quentin Johnston has not been invited to night 1 of the draft, which historically, if you've not been invited, says that you're more than likely not going to be a first round pick. So that is a concern to me, because I do think he's a first round pick talent. I think he's a good receiver. I think he has the potential to be a great receiver. So if all that is shaking out to be true and he's not been invited, that says to me that unless something monumental happens, NFL teams don't see him as a first round pick. So realistically, you could go anywhere from 2 to, if the world breaks right, 5. I think it will land around 3. And I think you'll look at Addison, Flowers, and Smith-Njigba. I think they'll be the 3 that will go tonight. And then I personally would take Johnston. I think I would have him. And then if he went high enough, then Hyatt could be in the realm. But I think it's going to be 3 tonight will go. And then I think those other 2 will go very high on day 2. I think they'll be gone by pick 45, pick 50 tops. I don't think we're going to be waiting around for those guys to come off the board.
No.
Same with Charbonnet. I think he's gone by pick 50, 55. Yes. He'll be gone by that sort of range because the drop from him down is massive. So I think, these players will go. And the same with whoever doesn't get drafted tonight out of those 5 will go early, because the drop to the Tillmans, the Rice, the Mims of these worlds is just too great. It's too great. And I like all of those players. I really like Tillman. I think Tillman is undervalued. I think he's a sneaky value for teams if he falls low enough. But there are some concerns, as there is with Rice, as there is with Mims. All these players have huge question marks about them that maybe the top 5 guys don't.
I'll add one more long shot wide receiver who could possibly go. I know Peter Schrager of the NFL Network had a mock draft where he was mocked to the Saints, and that's Jonathan Mingo of the University of Mississippi, who Seems as if the NFL is far more excited about him than dynasty managers are, because Mingo never had a 1,000-yard season at Ole Miss. He was the second on the team in receiving last year, but he does have a big body. He is NFL teams do value blocking in their wide receivers, and Mingo is a very willing blocker, but he is big and he is well built to deal with press coverage. And he is one of the toughest receivers after the catch, just to tackle and get on the ground, that I've seen since Anquan Bolden. And I think he had the second biggest hands. He's like 6'1", 220 something. He's a big dude, big hands, and ran like a 4.46 at the combine. Like Anquan Bolden was a 4.7 runner, and Mingo is actually fast. So like whether he can separate, I think at the NFL level, like that's mainly the knock on him, that he is not an elite separator or wasn't in college. But I think NFL teams like everything else about him. I don't think he goes in the first round. I think it's definitely a long shot, but I do think he's going to go in the second. And, I'm kind of intrigued that one of his visits pre-draft was with the Steelers, and that is a team that knows what they're doing when it comes to drafting wide receivers. So if they're interested in Mingo, maybe we should be interested in Mingo too.
That's definitely fair. I'm going to throw two more receiver names that really interest me. One, I think will definitely go in the second round, and that's Tyler Scott. Again, you've said it. The NFL's obsessed with speed. He was the fastest receiver at the combine. He ran a low 4.42. I think he's a perfect fit for what the Chiefs need and what the Chiefs are desperate for. A real separator and game breaker, especially when you look at Tyreek Hill going. And I've read some interesting insights from the Athletic and guys on the beat there. They definitely feel that there's a lot of love in that room for Tyler Scott. Again, don't think he goes round one unless, they decide to break the internet tonight. But I do think I would look at him at pick 63 and think that is a mortal lock if he's not there, if he's not already gone off the board. And then I think the most interesting receiver to watch on day two is Kayshon Boutte. He could literally go high 30s, or he could go undrafted. He could literally fall anywhere on the map, depending on how people view him, because he's probably the most divisive receiver in this draft. I think it's probably fair to say. But I think he's got interesting characteristics that will make him a successful NFL wide receiver. But is he going to deliver that? And is anyone going to fall in love with him enough to take him? So I think he's a really interesting guy where he could go. Because, again, I could see him going round 2. I could see him going round 7. It really is that wide a variance as to where he could go. He intrigues me more than anybody about where he could land. Because it could anyway.
Yeah, his first 2 years at LSU were spectacular. Well, first season and a half, because he got hurt midway through his sophomore season. But he was really exciting. And he's one of those guys who, even though he doesn't test well, I know that Matt Waldman compared him to like Jarvis Landry and Robert Woods. Guys who are just good receivers and are good at getting open, even if they are not, even if they don't test especially well.
Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting time.
Yeah, Boutte is like the forgotten talent of this draft class. Started really hot, like Pat said, and then he could be so good in the NFL. And he's one of the guys I'm sort of rooting for to improve as he gets into the big leagues. Tight end class, people have been drumming on about this tight end class now as being superb for as long as there's been draft talk. This is the best tight end class, and the tight ends in this class are fantastic. Do we think more than 2 tight ends go round 1? And who's your favorite to maybe not go round 1 but be effective in the NFL?
I think it's probably going to be exactly 2 with Michael Mayer of Notre Dame and Dalton Kincaid of Utah. And I think it's believed that Mayer is sort of the all-around player. The comparison has been Jason Witten, which, Witten had an amazing career and was productive for more than a decade. And then Kincaid, who I think people see as more of a pure pass catching tight end, not really a blocker, but he's a really good pass catcher. And, some people are saying he could go as early as 13 to Green Bay. Yeah. I don't know if anyone else sneaks in. Darnell Washington of Georgia, who's actually the second best tight end on Georgia. next year, I mean, absolute first round Brock Bowers is going to be early first round pick next year. I mean, he was
top
the best.
10.
Tight end, best tight end in college football without question. But Washington is just enormous. 6'7", 270 pounds. And I think he ran a 4.4 something. And then they showed like video clips of him moving a blocking sled around like, it was like a parcel delivery man. Just walking around with, other guys were struggling to move the blocking sled like 3 feet, and Darnell Washington was like, where do you want it? So he could maybe sneak in, but apparently he's got sort of an old foot injury that maybe has teams a bit scared of him. Luke Musgrave is another one. He's had some injury issues, but he is nearly 6'7" and runs like a gazelle. And some people think that maybe he has the most pass catching upside. Maybe even, as much as Kincaid has, but he's also dealt with a lot of injuries during his college career. So I don't think he goes in the first round, although he's been mocked there in a few spots.
That's crazy.
And that's it. And a guy I like who's under the radar a bit is Sam Laporta of Iowa.
Love Sam Laporta. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's just really a gamer, and he's great after the catch. And I think he's a good pass catcher, really good track record at Iowa with George Kittle, Noah Fant.
They build tight ends.
Yes.
That's what I mean. They tight ends in Iowa, and great. I think right up there with breaking tackles as well last year.
Yeah, and at least those other Iowa tight ends played in functional offenses. I mean, Iowa's offense last year was one of the worst in college football, and Sam Laporta still managed to have like nearly 700 receiving yards, and was far and away their best weapon on offense. And wherever he goes, I think he's going to enjoy playing with a quarterback who can actually throw a decent spiral and has a chance of hitting him in the numbers, because he didn't get that in college.
Yeah, I like Laporta. I think he's an awesome talent. I'm a big fan of him. It's a great tight end class. I think you could see as many as 10 or 12 get drafted.
Yeah,
which is mad for a tight end. You would never see this many tight ends get drafted, but there's a lot of really good. You're going to see a lot go end of day 2, day 3. Schoonmaker of Michigan is one that pops to mind. Strange of Penn State is another one.
Zach Kuntz, just because he tested so well. I mean, he's an athletic marvel. So we could see maybe up to like 7 going by the end of day 2.
Yeah, that really could happen. Like it's phenomenal how deep this class is in terms of. It's just a shame it's a position that doesn't impact fantasy football all that much. But it's fun to watch in real life. So yeah, I think we're in an interesting space with tight ends in the NFL, where you've got a lot of guys, but you haven't got a lot of the top end, the elite. And there is room for these guys to come in and after a year or two really break into having great careers, because there's opportunities. There's a lot of teams that don't have one good tight end, let alone 2. There's a lot of these teams that could do with drafting a tight end. So I think there's definitely a strong need in the NFL for 10 plus tight ends to be drafted this year. And I think a lot of them can contribute. I don't think a lot of them are fantasy worthy, but I think a lot of them are going to contribute in the NFL.
Do we think there's going to be any big shocks tonight? Has anybody thought of something that might be really left field and exciting in tonight's draft?
Well, Levis going at 2 would be mad.
Yeah, obviously, apart from that.
I mean, there have been a couple of interesting rumors about possible trade-ups for quarterbacks. And I've heard that maybe the Vikings are interested in moving into the top 3 to take Anthony Richardson. I mean,
I'll see you later, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I mean,
I would hate that so much, because I just think the Vikings are doing so many beautiful things right now. I just would no.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know that they have the draft capital to really do that, but that Cardinals pick is definitely in play. I don't think the Cardinals want to draft there, and the Cardinals are a really intriguing team because they've got that pick that we'll see what kind of heat is on that pick for a possible trade up for a quarterback. And they've got DeAndre Hopkins, who could be moved tonight. He could be the A.J. Brown of this. Well, I think the A.J. Brown thing was wholly unexpected last year. Hopkins, I don't think would be too unexpected. And I suppose we should mention other guys who could possibly be traded tonight. Maybe one of the reasons why some people don't think the Texans go for a quarterback at number 2 is that maybe they're interested in dealing for Trey Lance, who suddenly looks like he's expendable for the 49ers. So
I mean, he's definitely going, isn't he? Because I was saying this to someone and said, well, do you really think Trey Lance is going to go? It's like they've tipped the hand because they signed Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is not going to San Francisco to be a clipboard
third
guy.
quarterback, right?
It's not happening. So he's definitely going. And it would make sense that tonight is premium night, but he could go early tomorrow. Like it could. I don't think it necessarily has to happen tonight, but
right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it could be the Texans. I think there's a few teams that could be in play for Trey Lance.
And one more quick one for you is there's been a little bit of suggestion of the possibility that the Patriots might be looking to move on from Mac Jones and trade up and get someone else, because apparently there's a rift between Mac Jones and Bill Belichick. So I don't know about the credibility of that rumor, but I've heard that from a few different places as something that could conceivably happen. Yes. So I think we will see at least one sort of trade involving a team that, maybe we're not expecting to move up in the draft, but wants to move up in the draft and take a quarterback. I think we're going to get at least one surprise trade up for a quarterback.
Yeah, I think that will happen. I'm looking more at trade backs. So I actually have the Colts trading back. We know that they love to do this. We know that they love to build draft capital. I can see them moving down a few slots. I don't understand why Arizona wouldn't just pick Will Anderson Jr. I don't know why you wouldn't do it. I just think he's the best player in the draft. Why would you not select the best player in the draft? Like, I just think it's got to be pretty easy, right? I kind of get the logic of taking a quarterback at 1. I kind of get the logic of taking a quarterback at 2. I personally would advocate Houston taking Will Anderson Jr. and not taking a quarterback, and instead roll with a quarterback like a Davis Mills, or go and get yourself like a Matt Ryan or something, and just roll for a year or two and just build your team to where you're ready to compete. Because I think taking a quarterback now with Houston, we've seen this mistake over and over again with the Jets as an example, where they take a quarterback when the team is absolutely nowhere near ready to compete. They set the quarterback up to fail. Whether or not they were good enough or not to begin with is a debate in its own right. But Sam Darnold went on to a truly awful team, and he's not a generational talent like a Trevor Lawrence, like a Joe Burrow. And they're the exclusions to this rule. If you've got a generational player at quarterback, you've got to select them. But teams select a quarterback at 1 or 2. Mitchell Trubisky's another one. Players that are overdrafted on their skill set, but actually don't have that ability to transcend and go ahead and change the organization's direction of travel, and then they end up picking another quarterback in 3 years because it's not worked. And I think if I'm Houston, I'm probably, if I was the GM, if I was Nick Caserio, I would take Will Anderson Jr. I would just take a bridge quarterback, or I've got one on the roster in Davis Mills. And I would just sit there and I would take the best player in the draft, and I would just keep stockpiling the best players in the draft and build the trenches, build the offensive line, build the defensive line, build a good nucleus of talent if I was Houston. And then when I'm ready to be in a Super Bowl window, take my quarterback and use that as a cheat code. Because we're seeing it now every year. Teams getting to the Super Bowl with their quarterback on a rookie contract. We saw it last season with Jalen Hurts. We saw it the year before with Joe Burrow. We saw it the year before that, or a couple of years before that with Patrick Mahomes. The exception was Kansas City and Tampa Bay in the COVID year, but Tampa Bay had Tom Brady on a $25 million contract. It wasn't a cost prohibitive, and he's always taken a below market deal. So having a quarterback on a below market deal, either through signing them on a below market deal or a rookie, which is the more common way of doing it, is a huge cheat code to your organization. So I think, why would you burn that and take a quarterback now? The trade for Trey Lance makes more sense if it doesn't overcost you, but it's certainly more than drafting one. But I personally would would take Will Anderson Jr. as if I was the Texans GM, except the fact we're not going to be brilliant this year because you're in a tough division anyway, and just move on and build next year, take your draft capital, build your team out. And then once in 2 years' time, once you've got your team in a half decent spot, then you can start thinking about quarterback.
Yeah, and I think it's funny they might be able to get Will Anderson and Trey Lance because I feel like the 12th pick would be pretty fair compensation for Lance, and I have a feeling the 49ers would take that if it were offered to them. I'm definitely with you. I can at least forgive the Texans if they take a quarterback over Will Anderson at number 2. I think I would be with you, Murf, and personally prefer Anderson. What I couldn't agree with is if they take Tyree Wilson over Will Anderson, as has been widely rumored. And yet they've got a head coach who was a linebacker at Alabama and has certainly access to the the people inside that building to know everything he needs to know about Will Anderson, who, boy, I know his third year wasn't quite as impressive as his second year. But after the 2021 season, if someone would have told me that Will Anderson was not going to be a top 3 pick, I mean, I would have pretty much bet my meager life savings on that not being the case. So I'll be shocked if Anderson slides out of the top 3.
Yeah, I think that would be one of the most awful falls I can think of. Because I just think he's the best player in this draft. I just think it's not close. There's not that many first rounders to begin with, and then you've got a player like him who I think, if I'm sitting here and you were to ask me, shortlist 2 or 3 guys who could potentially be potential multiple Pro Bowlers / in a conversation if it all goes well for a Hall of Fame career, I can only come up with Anderson Jr. in this class. I can't see it. I think you can make a case for a couple of players potentially being multiple Pro Bowlers at tackle. Paris Johnson Jr. could be one of those guys, for example. But yeah, I don't think. I think if I'm looking at players who could potentially have a Hall of Fame career in this draft, Will Anderson Jr. is kind of where I draw my line and say that's it. So for him to fall outside of 3 would be madness, and he's just the biggest. I don't know. I just think it. I just don't. I wouldn't understand it. I just wouldn't get it. Like I'd sit there and go, I'd need someone to explain to me why they passed on him because I wouldn't get it. I get it at Carolina. I kind of get it at Houston, although I wouldn't do it. I certainly wouldn't get it anywhere else. It just wouldn't make sense to me unless you're in a win now mode and you need one piece, and that one piece is going to help you get there. And I still think, well, that's genius, a pretty good piece that will help you compete this year.
Yes. Yeah, it would be baffling. Right, guys, let's finish this off with a quick fire ultimate fantasy finish. You can have one player. You choose the player. Where would you want them to land for the maximum fantasy performance in this year or going forward?
Murf won't like this, but I'm going to say Bijan Robinson to the Eagles because I would love to see as many issues as the Eagles might have, feeling that they need to upgrade at safety, cornerback, replace some of those old edge rushers, maybe get another defensive lineman to play alongside Jordan Davis. I mean, how good a defense do you need if you've got Bijan Robinson, Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert? Like that offense could be a 30-point a game offense. So that's sort of the dream scenario. I do think they would have a dream team on offense. I just would love to see that. I don't think maybe it won't happen. Maybe that's a hoarding of offensive resources, but that's the one I think I'd kind of like to see.
I've got one that I think is I don't say highly likely, but I think is one that wouldn't shock most people if it was to happen tonight, and that would be Zay Flowers to the Los Angeles Chargers at 21. I just think that just fits for me like absolutely perfectly. Going to be the heir apparent to Keenan Allen. You're going to put him on a great, highly charged offense. We know that Mike Williams can't always stay healthy. He's going to get plenty of opportunity. That team can support 3 wide receivers as well with the amount they put it in the air. We still don't know what's going to happen with Austin Eckler. Let's say he gets moved on as a player. You could also watch out for in the next 2 days as to what happens with him. if they move on from Eckler, this ball's going to go in the air 650 plus times next year, and people are going to be there to catch it. And Zay Flowers could be very, very good, not just year one, but I think from a dynasty perspective, he could vault up to the second wide receiver for me in dynasty if he goes to the Chargers. One, because the capital stacks up, but two, I just think you want to get as many guys on that Chargers offense as possible. And I think that one would really excite me if it was to happen.
I like that one too. It seems like a lot of people have Jordan Addison mocked there, but it seems like he and Keenan Allen have slightly redundant skill sets. They could use a speed dimension, and Flowers would give them that.
And we know that Herbert can exploit that because he's done it with Heighton and whoever else he's had to go over the top. Random X receiver here with pace, insert here. So yeah, I think give him an actual pace weapon that he can use more frequently, and I think that could just be really exciting. And I think it will unlock Justin Herbert even more because it will give them more to think about. Defenses covering him, but I just think for Zay Flowers and Justin Herbert, I just think everything is just awesome. I just love the Chargers. I think they're a great team. So give them great players and get them better.
Fair. My only pushback on that is well, I will get to me. My only pushback on that, Murf, is I think the Chargers, their only receiver they had for their top 30 visit was Jordan Addison. So potentially that could put a little kibosh on your sitch there. For me, this is a really difficult one. I'm really high on Gibbs, but he's not a true 3-down back. I think if Charbonnet was to go to the Bengals, because I think June 1st they can save $10 million from releasing Mixon. So I think if Charbonnet was to go to the Bengals and just exactly the same as the Eagles, load up that offense with an even he could be a 3-down back. I think he's got the skill set to do so. And if you were to stick him there with Joe Burrow and just be that short yardage blanket when Burrow goes through his progression so quickly, nothing there, Bosh, Charbonnet, give it to Charbonnet. That would be absolutely fantastic.
I like that one.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That would.
Well, and also there's some rumor about is Mixon going to play much next year? He could have an impending suspension, with some off the field stuff. So that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm a bit more excited now than I was, I would say, a few hours ago.
Well, if Pat and I have managed to spend the hour and a half hyping up the draft for you to be excited, Murph, whilst you slam into your work life, then that is our mission.
I'm always excited. Yes. I'm just saying I'm less excited than I would be in previous years. I think it's again. I just think the lack of talent, but elite talent. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of scenarios tonight with trades. I really hope it happens. I hope it puts on a really good show. Kansas City looks like a fun place to host it as well, so I'm excited to see what they do. And I really hope that the commissioner doesn't get in the way of the draft too much. He's kind of making himself more and more of the star of the show, and it needs to be less and less of that.
He is going to get booed. We know that.
I don't mind him getting booed. Like I don't mind him playing the crowd a little bit, but sometimes it kind of he drags it on a little bit. Like when they bought the chair, was it last year where they bought the chair out, or was it the year before? And then they had people from the crowd making pics from the chair, and it was just a bit like, okay, like we've done that once. That was funny. This is the 32nd time we've seen a team come and draft out of the chair. Like, come on, this is me. Like, I get it. I just before we go, right, and conscious we've been on for nearly an hour and a half, is I got a fun bit of trivia handed to me yesterday, and it's who was the first player to hug the commissioner when drafted in the first round?
That is so obscure that you'd have to know it to even have a guess.
It wasn't that long ago, and the only reason I know this is because this player has been in the news this week. Then that's the only reason why it came up.
Wow. So it was Goodell. It was Goodell being hugged.
So it was Goodell. Goodell was the commissioner. This player was drafted in 2010.
Oh well, that's me out instantly.
I'm struggling here. I'm trying to think back of who might have.
See, this is what I do.
I have to give up.
It's Gerald McCoy. Announced his retirement this week from the NFL. He was the first player to hug the commissioner, and then it became an ongoing tradition with players ever since, every year, including Christian Wilkins a few years ago, who sent the commissioner flying when he jumped into that's still one of my all-time favorite draft moments.
See, it doesn't matter, Murf. I've been away for a long time. We used to do a segment called Murf on the Streets where you brought interesting NFL stats to the podcast, and there you are, straight back at it, bringing that random stat from the middle of nowhere to the forefront of people's imagination.
That's why people subscribe. You can get your top 32 picks anywhere, but how many people are talking about Gerald McCoy hugging the commissioner as an interesting fact, and that being the first one?
It was a good one. It was a good one. I'll tell you what was good. Me being back in this chair doing this. Get to do it with you, Murf. Pat, get to do it with you on my return back. I mean, I don't think it starts much faster than that, if I'm brutally honest. Pat, if people aren't aware of where you are out there in the whole wide world, where can they find your work and the stuff you're producing?
They can find me at fantasypros.com. There's going to be, I think I am doing a Dynasty Superflex mock draft immediately after round one to see how the round one landing spots are going to change the landscape. So look for that tomorrow, I guess, on Friday. And they can find me on the Fantasy Pros podcast and the Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast. Unfortunately, I ended Fitz on Fantasy after 222 episodes. Just had to. I'm going to be appearing on a few more of the Fantasy Pros podcasts this fall. So I was didn't want to get a bit too overextended there. And people can find me on Twitter at Fitz_FF. And I just want to thank both of you for having me. I always love catching up with you guys. I feel honored that I was invited to be the guest upon Stock's triumphant return to the show. And, if Scott Hansen won't go as far to call you the best fantasy football podcast in the UK, he says you're one of the best. I'm going to go ahead and say the best.
Oh, well, that's very kind. I appreciate it and always appreciate you coming on. I don't know how many times it's been. For me, not enough. I am very sad that Fitz on Fantasy is gone because I absolutely love that show, but it means you being on the main pod more is great, and Dynasty Pros podcast is amazing. You had a good friend of mine, Tom Strachan, on there recently. So it's great to have more UK content creators out there, and was pleased to see him on there. And also I get to meet your great friend Colm Kelly in July, which I cannot wait, at the UK FFC, who's the producer of Fitz on Fantasy. So I'm looking forward to catching up with him in person and sharing some Pat Fitz love then.
Yeah, we were talking about that. He's very excited to meet you in person, and that's going to be quite an event. I might have to find an excuse to get over to the UK for that.
Well, that'd be amazing. I'm looking forward to doing a segment on breaking into creating content for the fantasy football community. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And I'm 2 spots after me is my twin, Will Gavin. Will Gavin, for you, Fitz, or for anyone in the US, is a sports broadcaster here in the UK. He does radio broadcasts. So he does Super Bowl. He gets to fly over every year for the Super Bowl and does it for radio. So when we broadcast on the radio here, so he's like our equivalent to whoever you'd have on like Westwood One kind of thing. But him and I look very, very similar. He has a bigger beard than me, but we look very, very similar. So even his promo tweet mentioned that he was my lookalike. I think I'm more his lookalike than he is mine. But either way, yeah. So I think it's literally me, one other person, and him. So it's going to be a lot of big ginger guys on stage in a really short space of time. That's going to weird out a lot of people. So
I don't think there's
fun.
Enough big ginger guys on stage, if I'm honest, Murf.
We're dying breed. Yeah.
Well, hey, I'm raising one. So
yeah, you are, and same here. So both our lads look like they could be brothers.
That's it. I love it, boys. This has been an experience. It's been a pleasure to be back, Pat. It's been a pleasure, Murf. I'm so pleased I'm back, my man. If you don't know where Murf is, you can follow him on Twitter at Murf_NFL. You can go find his Brain Dump and Substack. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, head over to Patreon and check out 5 Yard Rush over there. We have a varying degree of tiers, I believe, Murf, still. I haven't obviously plugged that in a while, so that could be out of date. But Rush Nation, it's draft night. We are mere hours away. I hope your team drafts sensibly and you get something you deserve. It's a bit like the second Christmas for us NFL fans. But until next week, Rush Nation, as always, do not forget, keep rushing.